Good afternoon, everyone. Now I am going to proceed with trade and investment policy reforms of 1991 reforms. The name of the book is NCERT Class 11 Economics. So there were a whole bouquet of reforms that were initiated by the 1991 reforms, and one such area where India was dragging behind, it was trade and investment. So here the situation was to protect domestic industries during that time. India it resorted to quantitative restrictions (QRs). Quantitative restrictions. So as the name suggests, ये reforms quantity के लिए थे, quantity of imports. So especially here, the main target area it was the imports which needed to be reduced in order to protect the domestic industry. So the question comes, why the domestic producers needed to be protected? And the reason lies in the whole chronology of from 1952 to 1991. So let's take a background tour. So during the year of 1952, most of the population, it was first it was poor, and second it was employed in agriculture. Second, the manufacturing backbone, it wasn't even there. I cannot say it was the backbone was poor or malformed or still in development, but because the real reason is the situation in which the British left us was so pathetic that at first no foreign investment, no foreign investor was interested in investing in development of Indian industry. And second, the private capital of domestic industries, it wasn't sufficient to kickstart the economy, especially the manufacturing and industrial front. So the manufacturing wasn't even there. So the situation at that time during 1952, it needed the state control. It required the state to control the commanding heights of economy. And this phrase of controlling the commanding heights of economy, it means the state it need to look after, it need to undertake um, the production and ownership of essential goods, commanding heights of economy. So the state control it meant ownership and production of goods. It was under the state. So that was that, because it was initially needed, it was the need of time for state to play a larger role. But gradually, when our country started developing, when the industrialists they started looking for many niches for their production, all, in short, the wheels of Indian economy they started moving. Indian economy they started moving from 1965 or 1970s onwards. So by this time, the Indian private sector, the domestic private sector, it needed support. Domestic private sector, it needed support. It needed protection. Why? Why did it need protection? Because even though the Indian industry was still developing, the world manufacturing units, especially the warehouse of the world. That was what called at the time Britain. So the British or the European industry, they were producing goods of high quality at cheaper rate, and that also in en masse, in large quantities. So the European machines they were producing, they were juggling up huge load of huge loads of products, and those products were also in some quality. उनकी क्वालिटी ऐसी तो थी कि इंडियन प्रोड्यूसर्स they could not compete with them. So the matter was that जब तक Indian producers they do not become capable of producing qualitative goods or goods of certain quality, certain standards, they need to be protected. So in order to protect them, government or the state at the time, it resorted to quantitative restrictions, by which it meant the restrictions were put on quantity, which in short can be limit on quantity. And limit on quantity of what? Of imports. So imports were limited, and this activity, this limitation, it was put down by two measures. First one was tariff and the other one was quota. Tariff as in a tax on imports. So which means if you are if certain good is being bought from a foreign country, let's say Netherlands, it is bought at 100 INR, even if it will be in global currency, but in Indian currency it will be 100 INR. And if in order to protect domestic producer, government put a tariff, a tax rate of 21%, then this import it will become 120, which is expensive when compared to domestic products. So anything expensive will not be bought by traders and consumers alike. So in that case, this measure of uh, putting tariff on imports, it was one such measure to reduce our reliance on imports. Then the other measure was quota. Quota is like government puts restriction on how much quantity can be imported, can be imported. So by both the measures, tariff and quota, government tried to reduce the reliance on imports and protect the domestic industry. But liberalization of trade and investment, it was initiated to increase international competitiveness of industrial production, of Indian industrial production, and also to initiate or bring foreign investment and technology into the Indian economy. The aim was to promote the efficiency of local industries and adoption of modern technology. So all in all, in short, the whole trade and investment reform they revolve around increasing the competitive competitiveness of international competitiveness of domestic industry, and then the other second aspect was to increase foreign investment, and the third aspect was to adopt modern technology. And the background case was that in order to protect domestic industry, India was following a regime of quantitative restrictions. So by keeping the tariffs very high and keeping the quota limited, government thought and government believed that it was encouraging the domestic industry, it is protecting them. But the side effect of these measures or these restrictions were that the Indian economy, instead of growing in capacity, instead of increasing its competitiveness, it reduced its efficiency and competitiveness. How did that happen? The thing is, if you keep protecting your domestic industry, I'm talking about any sovereign country or any economy, अगर आप अपने domestic producers को you keep protecting them, so there will be a time when the whole situation will become lax in term that उनको पता है कि their products they are protected, they will be bought and sold in the Indian market. Even if the foreign market is beyond their reach, but domestic market is still there. And whatever they this produce, it will be circulated in the domestic economy. And in that case, without any further effort, without any improvisation, without any improvement, they are likely reaping the benefits. And by reaping these benefits, the whole process become very lax and lenient. And Indian industrialists or Indian producers, they started producing substandard goods. और वो किस लिए? क्योंकि उनको पता है their products they will be bought by domestic consumers. And why is that so? Because गवर्नमेंट ने पहले ही imports पे it has put restriction. So बाहर से तो कुछ आ नहीं रहा, जो वो बना रहे हैं it will be bought, it will be sold. So the whole situation it led to production of the substandard goods, and ये चीज quantitative restrictions, ये चीज trade policy reforms के साथ ही ठीक हुई. So these reforms they aimed at first dismantling of quantitative restriction on imports and export. So first जो limit थी import and export पे it was done away with. Second, reduction of tariff rates so that uh, high quality goods with reasonable price structure they could be imported. Then third, removal of licensing procedure for imports. So there was no license needed to import. Earlier, traders they needed import licenses so that they could import goods into Indian economy. But ये procedure भी हटा दिया गया. Import licensing it was abolished except hazardous and environmentally sensitive industries. Then quantitative restriction on imports of manufactured goods and agricultural products were also fully removed from April 2001. This was the fourth aspect. Then export duties have also been removed to increase the competitive position of Indian goods. This was the fifth aspect of trade policy reforms. So there is another concept here, export duty. So export duty is like export tax, just like the import tax we discussed earlier. So export tax, it is taxed on the sellers, the producers who produce a good and seeks to sell this product in international market. So in order to discourage export of any commodity, export duty or export tax is levied. So, in earlier regime, export duties were also there to discourage Indian exporters from exporting their product to international market, and removal of which by trade policy reform, which were subsequently removed. So this removal it also increased the competitive position of Indian goods, since the removal of export tax it increases the decreases the value of Indian goods. So in short, by removing export tax, Indian goods they become cheaper, and anything cheaper will be sold and bought. So this was the fifth aspect of trade policy reform, and this is it. We will talk about privatization in the next lecture. Thank you very much.